It's 2012. I just finished a very wild ride in middle school, as most people have, and in my hometown there were 3 high schools I could decide to go to. Deciding on which one to go to was hard because I couldn't just choose which one my friends were going to because I didn't have any. Initially I just thought to go to the largest high school because they would have the most amount of options of classes to take, but I actually heard that one of the high schools in my town actually offered a full ride through college if you took the most science credits of anyone in your year. And since, even when I was younger, I had a massive passion for most fields in science and decided that would be where I would go. And once I did, I took every science credit they would let me. To make friends in a new place, I even started gathering up the people who had no one to sit with at lunch and would hide in the hallways, to all sit with me at my lunch table. It was a great way of making friends and meeting new people. There was one class that was troublesome though, and it was AP Biology. I was close to the top of my class, so my academics were not the reason I was having trouble with it. The reason I was having trouble was because every semester I was declined from taking the class. How that class was decided who would or who would not take it was by the teacher who taught it. She was someone I was in quite a few classes for because I was taking every science credit possible, and she taught more than just that one class. She did not like me though. I was a socially awkward kid that always just sat in the back of the class, talking to almost no one. She wouldn't let me in AP Biology for that reason. However, the full ride through college was decided by who won the Science Cup, and the Science Cup was decided by who had the most science credits, and I didn't need that one class to get the cup. I was doing very well in my classes, which were mostly college-level courses. Without spending a single second studying outside of class, it was an extremely tough year. The handful of friends I had before my senior year were all grades above me. My entire school year centered around showing up to classes and maybe talking for only a couple of minutes a day to the literally 2 only people that could stand being around me for a little bit. The table of people I talked about making my freshman year. During my first day of senior year, I actually saw that there was no more room at the table. I'm sure they would have been willing to split tables to create more room with me, but I didn't want to interrupt what they were doing because they seemed to be having a good time with each other. So instead I just smiled, let a tear fall down my cheek, and started hiding in the hallway myself to avoid people. I could go home, however, and still talk to those old friends and the ones I had online through TeamSpeak 3 while I played World of Warcraft, or go to my fast food job at Taco John's. The teacher who was the head of the science department, which I had many classes with, decided to retire going into my senior year. The person who then decided to become the head of the science department was the teacher who taught AP Biology. I was mildly annoyed simply because she would not let me in her class and I wanted the credits for university. Also, by this time, if she would let me in, I would be able to take every single science class my high school offered, and no one had done that before. I would still hold the record for the most science credits ever taken at that high school, even without that class, however, and I knew that it would be my ticket towards going to university comfortably. So, as I did not come from a rich family, it got closer to the end of the school year, and it was the time for the event where they announced the winner of the academic cups, obviously including the science cup. No matter how miserable I was, especially my senior year, at least I will have this. My heart and mind was racing as they were announcing the winner of the science cup. Finally I could be done with this miserable place, and then they announced a different name. I was immediately in shock. I had not even considered it for a second that they would announce someone else's name. I could not even comprehend fully what had just happened, so as soon as the event ended, I immediately headed towards the physics teacher's room to ask him if there was an error or something. He then told me what happened. The teacher that I didn't like, the one who taught AP Biology, and became the head of the science department, changed the rules of the science cup to make it required that you have taken AP Biology. This was the turning point in my life, and shortly after it was my final day of high school. I was 18 years old at the time. My entire life's success was really centered around one thing, and it was doing well in high school and getting that science cup. Also, during that time, for the most part, the faces I saw were about the same 20 people or so. The people that took those higher level classes almost always ended up being in the same classes together because my high school was not that large. Those same 20 people were in the last class of the year for DC English, and as we were getting ready to leave class, one of my classmates told me that I better not forget them when I become famous. I was immediately taken back by the situation. This was the same classmate who, when I sat next to him, moved to a different spot. Soon, however, the rest of the class joined in with him, even the teacher telling me not to forget them when I'm famous. They told me how smart they thought I was and how impressed they were with all the work I did in the class I had with them previously. It seemed genuine at the time. The very select people I've told about this all went to while they were making fun of me and just bullying me or something. But honestly, I did not see that in them. They all genuinely meant what they said and gave valid reasons to why they were telling me that. Even though I didn't display it to them, it made me really upset. Not that I'm the type to not be able to take a compliment, but why would I, if I ever became famous, remember them for anything more than resentment? I would prefer to go back to the rest of my life without even thinking about them at all. Yet, that one statement, I think, has made them stick around in my memory far longer than I would even like. I decided I wasn't even going to finish out the rest of the day. I simply walked out the front door of the high school and cried myself as I drove home. I was not entirely defeated at this point though. I still during this time got accepted into a nice university to study computer engineering. During the summer of 2016, going into my freshman year of college, getting ready for things at Missouri S&T, I met someone I spoke to at a mess hall. Even though it may be hard to believe based on what I said earlier, I'm not shy. So I approached someone I saw sitting alone. Turns out he was in a frat. Before this point, I always thought frats in college were just paying for friends. But after asking him more about it, he actually told me that frats were a great way to get involved in campus events, meet new people, and most importantly, all cheaper than actually living on campus. Frats are also very different based on which one you joined, and this was primarily made up of very nice and nerdy people. I actually decided to follow through with the process of joining. I was accepted into his frat and started enjoying the people I was around. In another change of events though, it really wasn't until my first day after moving there I realized that I was not doing well. Not that my mental state was good before this, but for the first time in my life, I wanted to kill myself. Even though where I was at right now was a good place in my life, I could not stop thinking about all the mistakes I've done in my life and how I could have lived my life better so that way I could be in an even better spot. Thankfully though, my mother was still in town before she headed back to our hometown, and after talking to her on the phone, we decided to pack up again and move immediately back home. I tried to say goodbye to the many people I just said hello to for the first time in that day, giving me awkward glances as I started moving out the day I moved in. The 5-hour ride home with my mother, while she was not mad at me, I could see true disappointment in me for the very first time. My mother, like most people, wasn't exactly proud of where she went in life, and she, just like the other people in my senior class, thought I was really going to make it somewhere. She had placed a lot of her hope in me succeeding in life, and just as she really saw that coming to life, I stripped it away from her. I got back home, and I decided I was going to go to a far easier university in town for that time being while I try to get my mental state figured out. But after about 2 months, the constant dread of knowing my mistakes in the past, bringing me to where I was, became overbearing. And feeling extremely like I should just end it all, resulted in me stopping to show up to classes. I couldn't even bring myself to be around other people anymore. The psychiatrist put me on a handful of different medications every 2 weeks, and it didn't even seem to be helping anything. My own counselor even said that I was the most difficult person she had ever tried to talk to. After a couple of weeks, as my mother came home early one day and saw me not at class, she immediately was upset, and very quickly figured out I had now flunked out of university. I could see the disappointment in her again. I knew I had to get a job and find somewhere to rent, because I couldn't continue living at my parents' house anymore. I struggled, applied to many places, and the few I actually got, I would show up for a day or two, then panic one morning and not be able to go. At this point, I had the potential of excelling as a computer engineer with the full ride through college, and I had fallen so low that I couldn't even work a simple job. I understood at this point I was leeching off my parents and the world around me more than anyone should. I shattered all potential I could have to even make myself worth any of their time, so I used an academic database to find the average lethal amounts per weight of one of the medications I was taking at the time, and I took 2 times that amount. I found comfort in telling myself that if everything ended this second, that would be alright. Even if I die, taking away more from the world, then that's fine. It's hard to explain to someone who wasn't in that mindset, or even to me now, the rationale behind it, but it gave me comfort. My father heard me vomiting downstairs, so he went there to find me barely awake, laying on the bathroom floor, covered partially in my own vomit. Immediately I was driven towards the emergency room. I do not remember anything once I was in the car because at that point I blacked out. But once I was in the emergency room, I had multiple IVs in me, making me get rid of the medication through activated charcoal and hydrating me, among other things. I had to remain in the emergency room for many hours just to verify I was sobering up, then I was admitted into the psychiatric ward. I arrived on a Friday night. On the weekends there were no activities to do, so I tried speaking to the other residents that were there at the time, but I had a lot of trouble. The person in front of me at the table attempted to shoot his brother with a shotgun as he was drunk. The man to my left believed he was a 5-year-old child as he was writing a list of people who would prefer dead in crayon. And the lady to my right was constantly worried how she looked in her makeup 30 minutes after she had played in her own shit. She scared me even more than the crayon guy because at least I didn't see my name on his paper. I quickly realized that if anything this would worsen my mental state, and so I put on a face to the doctors saying that it was a compulsive decision and that I do not want to harm anyone else or even myself. I'm sure the doctors were smart enough to see through my lie, but I conducted myself more reasonably than anyone else there, so I was released after being there for only 72 hours. At this point, I was so ingrained in the system well enough to get accepted by a caseworker in a state program where they would pay for my medical needs. It was good because soon I was going to fall off my father's insurance while I was out of college, and I didn't have my own because I had no job. While being there, I was able to receive far better medical support than what I had before. There were better trained psychiatrists and counselors. They told me, professionally, I was non-responsive to all forms of treatment. They realized I had problems at this time, so they solidified a diagnosis of major depression, generalized anxiety, OCD, and schizophrenia. While the first three I had for a long time, it wasn't really until recently I started seeing and hearing things. Often taking place as family members, or people that mean a lot to me personally, yelling or ranting at me about certain things or how much of a disappointment I was. It would hurt my ability to even talk to my family members that meant a lot to me, among other people. As much as I loved my grandpa, for some reason my mind wouldn't stop having him yell at me and treat me like he never would in real life. At this point, I was going to an appointment 3 to 4 times a week, going to see my caseworker, seeing a psychiatrist, seeing a counselor, and even seeing a gastrointestinologist because now I began vomiting multiple times a day because of anxiety. I had other suicide attempts, none of them quite serious as the first, and just generally thought I was a complete waste, and I eventually began to hate every single part of who I was. I, at this point though, was thankful that there was still a flame in me. Even though it was flickering and barely alive, I still had passion, even if it was primarily spent on hating myself. Although, after a year of being useless in the summer of 2017, I had an idea. If I could just spend this little energy I do have on hating myself in a way that matters, maybe I can get better. I understood that with emotions, such as sadness, I didn't do it right. I know it sounds weird to say I'm bad at being sad, but if sadness is encompassing my life to such a degree that I want to kill myself and can't do almost anything, then I'm not being sad right. So I tried to stop being sad. Not to be sad better, not to stop being sad when I shouldn't be, but to stop being sad altogether. Every time I felt the desire to cry or be disappointed in myself, I would mentally force it down. I would use negative reinforcement on myself, telling myself to stop being sad, not to tell myself why I should stop being sad, even if I should be sad for the thing that is happening. I would just tell myself to stop. The weirdest thing was that it started working. I began to stop feeling as sad. Every single day was a little less sad than the next. Some things would happen that eventually should make me sad, and I would just notice them and react rationally rather on emotion. So once I was done with sadness, I worked on happiness, love, anger, fear, and any other chemical emotion I could feel. I understood at this point to completely rewire myself, I needed to do a complete restructuring of my psyche if I wanted to become better. I got to the point where I slept, ate, and shit. I did not care about my own enjoyment of life or hating it, I simply existed. Once I finally hit that state, I thought I would try to learn emotions again, but I was hesitant. There was a chance if I started to learn emotions again, I would simply fall back into the hole I was before. I also got a job and was holding it down for the first time. I started working at the post office. While I didn't enjoy it, I didn't hate it. I simply showed up to work and came back home. This was around the same time where people started noticing that I was a lot different than I ever was before. Almost that I was a different person. I started displaying these robotic/autistic traits that I never really did before. I went from this overconfident kid to a shell that simply existed. I still understood that I needed to stop leeching off my parents, so saved up money from working at the post office and got a rental house with someone I used to know in high school and talked to in TeamSpeak 3 all the time. At this point though, I started to try to embrace my own potential again. I thought that I could start trying to do my best to make the world a better place for others. I wasn't dumb enough to think you can optimize life, but I did genuinely think that I could get myself on my feet and keep building myself up to where I was programming to a level where I could combat the dangers of AI. As dumb as that sounds, this was a legitimate path I was leading towards, because I thought it would be the most valuable thing I could do to better the world around me. This was the beginning of my personal philosophy of nihilistic optimism, that even if I don't believe in any purpose of my own life, that all is futile, that does not mean it is for other people. Other people have hopes and dreams, other people see beauty in the life around them and want to enjoy it. If I truly think nothing matters, then I should do what I can to better the lives around me that think it does matter. But the optimization of life comes with lack of motivation. Art does not come because people think they need it to live. People don't spend every single day waking up and falling asleep trying to create something beautiful because they need it to carry on to the next day. We as people are not designed to optimize the bettering of everyone's lives. We were put here to enjoy it. Our brain evolved to reward us with pleasure. Everything we do is motivated by it. It's why oftentimes nothing feels as good as sex, because the most important thing to us is spreading the human race. But it's not that simple. There was still a need as cavemen to keep elders around because they could pass knowledge on how to live our lives better. They did not just murder someone because they were no longer able to hunt. Who would teach the children to hunt before they could get their hands on experience? Who would guide people on how to laugh and love? Something I ask myself a lot is why there is any purpose in laughing. If humans are simply meant to breed, why would we waste our time on anything other than sustaining and creating more life? A plant is not conscious of its process of creating more of itself. It has simply continued to do that because if it was doing anything else, it wouldn't even exist. But as humans, we have the burden of consciousness. We are aware of our own existence, in that we find we have free time. A woman does not immediately spit out a baby when one is conceived. There are 9 entire months the mother must spend before the child is even born. Oftentimes, a hunter's amount of meat depends on the environment around him and less on the amount of time he actually spent hunting. That left a lot of time to fill, and with the ability to think about your own existence, you now have to worry about your ability to enjoy doing it. Once I came to this realization, I was no longer focused on just getting myself on my feet from rock bottom. I was worried about sprinting. Life is this incredibly short thing. Your time is very precious. I also realized that maybe I could live a better life than if everything went well, because the times I was broke, had to fill up my car with gas from a lawnmower to get to work, or telling my parents I was on a date while I was actually out sleeping in my car so that way they thought I was out doing something, made me a better person than if my life just went well. Most importantly though, I truly understand now that I can't go back in time. The best I can do is make my life the best it can be from this day forward. Once I focused on bettering my life, I decided I was going to go back to university. But as I was doing that, the single most life-changing event happened to me. And as dumb as it sounds, it was one of my YouTube videos blowing up. Ever since I was a child, I was obsessed with one day maybe entertaining people for a living, because I thought there was nothing more beautiful than having people forget about their life and just laugh for a moment. With this video doing well, it was my chance to finally maybe prove myself wrong. Instead of following down the path of programming like I talked before, maybe I could actually live my dream for once. Instead of trying to optimize my life and what I think is better, maybe I can work my ass off to make sure the world's a more beautiful place.